Hello everybody, it's Peter with an I, S-T-A-W-A-R-T. Welcome to segment 28 of, I don't know, The Dark Tower, I guess. Or it's sort of like segment 28. What you're hearing is a much older work of mine. Every few years I dust off old data storage and transfer the stuff to a new, more modern medium. And when I say dust off old data, I'm being literal. The stuff you're hearing is so old. The segments are listed as Tape 1, Tape 2, Tape 3. This seems to indicate that tape or magnetic ribbon was used. This is technology from the 1900s. Somewhere in the transferring process, a few minutes were cut off. It's from the party where Joe learns a lesson. When I talk about the age of the project, you might be thinking, oh, this must come from a time in which alcohol was frowned upon. No. Alcohol is used to symbolize anything with a naughty streak. As the audience, we can see Charles and Chauncey are using Joe, and Joe doesn't seem to mind being used. It's all very sick and wrong. Well, welcome to my mind. And now we continue with the missing segment of, I don't know, The Dark Tower, I guess? In the next room, these guys who Joe had just met were getting along with him great. They were excited about him and his brandy, and they went on telling stories about how they would drink whiskey all the time. This one guy claimed that he would stay drunk for weeks on end. Joe was making all these friends and decided that the brandy had really become a great tool for meeting new people and forming solid bonds. They all looked on as Joe took the lid off the cup and smelled it. It was pretty pungent. A few people wandered into the room, partly out of social osmosis, partly out of curiosity. Bear came in too. "What's that?" he asked. "This?" asked Joe. "Some brandy. You want some?" Bear had a real thing about that. He had been taught by his mom that drinking hard alcohol was an evil that needed to be done away with, because you could have too much fun and get pregnant from it. Due to a mix of scotch, brandy, and Schmidt, Bear had an estimated 20 fathers. Well, that's why he was so big. He was like a sandwich, stuffed full of fixins. No way," he said. "That stuff isn't allowed in this house." There was a silence as everyone contemplated their new morals. Joe expected this little group to stand by him, and they could all be embarrassed together. But instead they all backed away, trying to be out of the spotlight of guilt. Even the guy who said that he would be howling drunk for weeks on end. Even Charles and Chauncey. Joe stood alone, holding the cup. Chauncey scratched the back of his head and said to Bear in a hushed tone, "I don't touch that stuff at all. It's bad news, dude." Joe started to speak up, but he didn't. He could have started pointing fingers and trying to tell Bear that he was just a pawn, but he didn't. Bear figured Chauncey might be part of it, but he didn't feel like he had enough pull to bust everyone. But he could sure make an example out of this Joe character. As people looked down on him like he was a disgusting little worm, Joe had a smirk on his face. He saw things with crystal clarity. He saw the amount of integrity that flowed through the veins of this little network. He saw how they had become very small. Joe didn't bother to hurry as he made his way out with the cup. He felt something similar to pride. Pride is a good feeling from doing good things. But what he felt wasn't good. He went out into the darkness, where the bugs circulated around one of the outside lights in front of the carport. "Hey, Joe," called a voice. It was the guy who claimed he had drank a bottle of Mad Dog and then got bitten by a mad dog. He was one of them who backed into the shadows and uttered, "I don't even know who this guy is." "Hey, you don't mind if I have a slug of that brandy? I mean, if you don't mind." Joe looked at him with a grimace. 5 minutes ago, he would have bent over backwards for anyone in that house. Now he didn't care if they rotted. He didn't even care enough to tell any of them off. He just set the cup down on the hood of a nearby car and hobbled off into the night with his wounded leg. Okay, folks, I think we're back on track. I wedged that into the story, and now let's continue on with segment 28.
Yeah, replied Joe, looking over the ridge of the cliff down at the water as they made their way up the trail that led through the brush toward the old house. It's summertime, and I'm out of school. Sure, he agreed. Sure, I'll move in with you too. The rusty old gate with the sharpened forks had been squeaking as it swayed in the breeze. I've been doing a lot of work around here to fix the place up, explained Frank as he showed them around. Nancy didn't mind the looks of the place at all. She knocked her gums together. The holes where her teeth used to be made little suctioning noises that sounded kind of neat. She knew she had to keep those holes super clean, and if any food were left in them, she might get an infection. Also, eating was a little bit of a chore. If anything was too spicy or tangy or citrusy, it would really sting. When eating became such a dilemma, she did it less, and her body shape started to look a little bit different. Frank? Joe drew his attention to the elongated mound of dirt that looked like a giant candy bar had been freshly buried. What? Why? Joe scratched his head. What's going on here? Oh, here. Frank went over and straightened the little signpost. It would have weighed significantly less heavy on the minds of Joe and Nancy if the little sign said something like green peas, or spuds, or even giant candy bar. Instead, it was evident that Frank had planted potty mouth, plus a few yellow and red perennials, just to make it look nice. Nancy and Joe weren't sure what to say. Nancy searched for the words to form a question. Joe searched for a readily accessible escape route. Frank, it looks like you buried... She looked at his printing. Potty mouth. Yeah, remember Potty Mouth? He was the guy who used to be a jerk to us, clarified Frank. Yeah. I know who he is, Frank. That's not really what I'm confused about. She scratched her head and took a breath. You know, of course, that if there's a car accident or something, you can't put a person straight in the ground. You have to go a few places first. And there's some paperwork you have to fill out. I know you don't like paperwork and all, but... Nancy shook her head. She didn't like red tape either. But gosh. No, it's not like that, he explained. I can't go to the police, he said. This further complicated the matter in the minds of his friends. He did die of a car accident, or natural causes, or at least accidental poisoning, right? Asked Joe, hoping, wishing, praying that some sort of galactic phenomena would take them back 10 minutes and allow everything to happen differently. It was like sitting in a car waiting for the sheriff to walk up to the window to remind him he was going way over the speed limit. Only in this case, the penalty for the infraction of murder is potentially more significant than a simple traffic ticket. And there are no warnings for first-time offenders. This time I'm gonna let you off the hook, but if I ever catch you doing it again... No. Frank, what happened exactly? Asked Nancy. Oh, it's a long story. He shook his head with a grimace, whistling air through his teeth. It was evident that Frank had screwed up, but that response is what a person would use for lesser mistakes, like diving the shovel head into the ground and severing a power line. Forgetting the rule about burning styrofoam. Or having mistakenly grabbed a bottle of hydrochloric acid to chlorinate the pool. Or worse, lysergic diethylamine acid. During a pool party, you'd have a lot of really weird kids running around. The proper response to a situation like this might be, "You'll never take me alive!" Or, "If my demands aren't met, I'll do it again!" Not an embarrassed shake of the head,